You are now listening to Your Ideal Day with Adam Parker. Each week, we'll bring you an inspiring person or uplifting message on how to unlock your full potential. For more information, please visit youridealday.com. Your ideal, it's what you make it.
Welcome. This is the Ideal Day podcast. I'm your host, Adam Parker, and I'm so grateful for you guys tuning in with me today. So here's a question for you. How often do you find yourself doing something you know you shouldn't do, you know it's not going to have any benefit for you, but you still do it anyway? Whether that's eating junk food, watching just another episode on Netflix and when you know you should be going to bed, or it might be you want to start work at a particular time, but, I'll just start an hour later. All of these things are forms of self-sabotage, and we all have them. I certainly do have them. And these are things that most of the time we're unconscious to why we're doing it and even how we're doing it. Now, as you guys know, one of my big interests over the last year and a half has been about the power of our minds, how to understand how to use our minds, the operating system that we all have to be more effective, more efficient. And the subconscious mind is, my goodness, it's such a big part of everything we do. It depends where you get your information from, but a lot of people are in agreement that the subconscious mind runs 95% of the show. And we know that our subconscious runs off programs. We get given a program through repetition and then we run the program. So when we start to realize that a lot of our self-sabotage that we do, whether it be eating out and having junk food when we know we should be at home cooking or whatever it is, a lot of it is based around the programs that we're running off. And in today's show, I'm really excited about this conversation because we've got an expert on the show, Jason Christoff, who understands how the mind works, how programs are placed into our minds, but more importantly, how we can change the programs. And that's what really fascinates me because we can change the programs we're given. We're given programs from the minute we're born, from our family, from our environment, from the TV, news, radio, all around us every single day. We are being programmed to do certain things beyond our conscious awareness. And when you know you can change it yourself, that to me was just mind-blowing. So really excited about today's show. We have Jason Christoff on the show, who is a self-sabotage coach. Absolutely love his content. I'll put his podcast in the show notes. And I've learned a lot from this guy. And I wanted to introduce you guys to him because I think he's got a lot of great information and he can really help you understand why you're doing certain things when you know you don't want to be doing it, but you do it anyway. So really excited about this conversation, and we go deep into understanding how the subconscious mind works and how to start to reprogram it. So I want to welcome you all to the show. This is Adam Parker, and you're listening to the Ideal Day podcast. Old-time listeners, I love you guys. New-time listeners, I love you guys too. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you guys tuning into the show today. And you've tuned into a show that I really think is going to have a really big impact on how you see the world and start to realize that how our mind works and how we can change it. So I think it's going to be a really big episode for a lot of people today. So in today's show, we're talking to Jason Christoff on how to stop your self-sabotage. Really looking forward to this one. I know you're going to get a lot of value out of it. So quick bio on Jason. Jason Christoff runs an international self-sabotage coaching school where students are educated on the subjects of mind control, brainwashing, behaviour modification, and psychological manipulation. Jason's students then use their knowledge in these areas to help reprogram their clients into better versions of themselves on all levels. Jason believes that the social decay we openly see in our world today has only come about because key players in our society are using this manipulative psychology against most of humanity. If we are to survive and thrive in the upcoming years, Jason believes that each citizen must understand these processes as to protect themselves from future psychological operations. Really interesting conversation with Jason. Got a lot of respect for this guy. I really like the content he brings out, and I know you guys are going to get a lot of value out of today's show. So without further ado, this was my chat with Jason Christoff. Jason Christoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Adam. I appreciate the invite.
So, Jason, I'm really excited to have you on. I only got introduced to your content, I would say, about a month ago. I was saying before we jumped on, everything you're saying just resonates with me so much. And I wanted to get your message out to my listeners because I think it's really relevant, especially in the world that we now live in. Just bringing awareness to people on what's kind of happening in the background and things we need to be aware of and how we make our own decisions. So it's great to have you on the show. So I'm curious, what got you started in the whole world of understanding human psychology and your niche, which is around this self-sabotage that people do? What got you started?
Well, I was a professional health and exercise coach through the Chek Institute. That's from Paul Chek out in California. And he's like the number one health guru, in my opinion, in the world. So I would go out and take these certifications and I would come back charging a lot of money, of course, trying to make people lose weight and trying to get their health online. And I started finding, let's say there was a lady that wanted to lose 30 pounds. At somewhere around the 10-pound mark, there's this fear. It come out of nowhere. It was invisible. And it would like a gopher, like digging in the ground, trying to hide and go back to their old habits where they would, they'd lose 10 and then they go back and it would be 5. And I'm like, well, what happened? We have to go from 10-pound weight loss to 30. And she would say, well, I don't really know. And then I would find that with all my clients, whether they needed to lose 15 or even 100, somewhere around that double-digit weight loss mark, there'd be a change and they would become afraid to become literally better or sort of level up to what they're capable of. So I phoned the Chek Institute and I said, look, I've taken all these courses with you guys and these people are paying me a lot of money and I'm sort of failing here. The Chek Institute said, your customers probably have these mind viruses. They're programmed to be afraid of being outside the majority because we're hardwired as pack animals. Humans are pack animals, and we're always very prone to find the bigger group. And even if the bigger group is detrimental to us, like having membership in the bigger group is detrimental, our neurological system will drive us there under pressure. And I'm like, well, what part of the course did I miss? Like, why didn't you tell me about that? Well, they said that's in level 4. I didn't make it to level 4. So I said, well, how do I start? Like, can I deal with this? Is it even possible to override this basic neurology and this sort of magnetic attraction to the bigger herd? They said, oh, yeah, there's ways to do it. They sent me some books. And it was on like mind control and brainwashing and manipulative psychology. So I started using those tactics on my clients and it worked so well, I became unemployed because they didn't need me to whip them into shape and make an appointment and see them every day and push them. They would just show up on their own, stop their wine on their own, get to bed on time on their own. I didn't have to be their taskmaster. So I thought, since I'm unemployed, maybe I'm going to start addressing self-sabotage as the first step of getting in shape. And I'm going to offer this online. And it became, self-sabotage is this, this catch basket word I use where people, they take one step forward and 2 steps back and, they put their foot in one bucket of crap and quickly jump out into 2 more. I know it's about this herd-based psychology where we're always drawn to be a member of the bigger herd, regardless of what consequence that brings us. So I started to offer my services online, manipulating people psychologically online. It became so successful. I had to keep raising my price, and it still didn't stop the flow. So I opened sort of a psychological reprogramming institute. And I teach medical doctors, chiropractors, health professionals, coaches, and even the average person how to become sort of a certified self-sabotage coach and teach people about psychology, where the behavior comes from, why they do what they do. And it's such a shocking educational process that we've never lost the attention. When someone pays attention to our presentations, they are so shocked. They just continue with us. we teach them everything they need to know to vector up. And I've only had one person out of maybe 1,000 not be happy with my services.
And the thing is, this is relevant for everyone, because whether you're conscious of it or not, we all have these self-sabotage mechanisms. All of us, from the smallest thing to, you're looking at a cupcake and you're thinking, I shouldn't be eating that cupcake, but I'm going to eat the cupcake. That's probably a really basic example. We've all done it. We all know what we shouldn't be doing, but we do it anyway. And I find it so fascinating because this stuff is hackable. This stuff has been studied for a long time. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil, as we'll jump into. And I think it's brilliant. What an amazing way to improve oneself by looking just at your wiring. And I mean, that really, when we think about health, I think, what's the root cause? Root cause of health. Root cause of health for me is either being toxic or a nutritional deficiency. That's the root. And I think, wow, what's the root cause for why we do things in a certain way? And I think this is it. It's the wiring in your mind. So I want to open up this concept of self-sabotage. What is it? How does it show up in people? Give us like a top line on what it is.
Well, there's this part of our brain that loves us. So it starts off as the greatest love story in the world. And what happens is this part of the brain wants us to be safe and be secure, and it wants us to survive. Now, it has a method by which it accomplishes that. And this method is automatic. So it's going on without our conscious awareness. It's like our heartbeat, the menstrual cycle. You don't have any say. So this part of the brain looks out into our environment and looking for the most repetitive content. So the most repetitive content really reflects what the bigger herd is saying, thinking, or doing. And it's almost like this part of the brain writes down what the most repetitive content is on a piece of paper. And then it says, like to your neurological system without you knowing it, that if you mimic, copy, and emulate what's on that sheet, you're going to fit in with the bigger herd, because human psychology is simple. Most humans do what they do because other people are doing it. And if you blend in with the bigger herd, you're going to be safer. So this goes on, it's all automatic. Now, when you said it could be used for good or evil, I mean, it was probably designed by ourselves, by our genes, by God, the creator. And it worked really well, probably because if you were in a tribe in the middle of a jungle and your parents walked like the right-hand path to the cornfield, but there was a left hand, the repetitive exposure to seeing your parents walk that right-hand path probably kept you safe. The left-hand path was probably to the alligator pit or the wasp nest or the beehive or something like that. So mimicking the repetitive content of your environment, if you are in a tribal environment, it means you're going to, blend in, fit in, go along to get along, and you're most likely going to be safer and be accepted by the herd. But today, the people who rule us, unfortunately, know about this part of the brain that copies and mimics and emulates repetitive content outside our conscious awareness. They're basically manipulating. This is what the screens are for on the back of the seat on the airplane. There's screens on your treadmill. There's screens in your hand. There's screens on your wrist now. And what's happening is they're manipulating the repetitive content in order to modify our behavior. And if we're getting negative repetitive content, this part of the brain is being shown to just go after the repetitive content, and it has no ability to think long-term or judge long-term consequences of becoming part of X, Y, or Z tribe. This unconscious drive to mimic repetitive content, I'll give you a real-life example so your listeners can understand. So in 2001, there was a movie called Gone in 60 Seconds, and it was with Angelina Jolie and Nicolas Cage. And Nicolas Cage's brother was in trouble with a local, say, mob boss, and Nicolas Cage's brother was going to lose his life, and there had to be a favor exchange because Nicolas Cage was an old car thief. And so the mob boss came to Nicolas Cage and said, look, I'll let your brother off the hook, but tonight you're going to steal 100 cars for me. And if not, we're going to kill your brother. So this whole premise is around car theft. They had to steal 100 cars, I think, in 24 hours. And there was a lot of repetitive content about car theft on the screen. Now, psychology shows that when you expose this part of the brain, the subconscious mind pathway, to repetitive content, it doesn't know the difference between real time, so your real life, what's on a screen, or even imagined thought, which I'll talk about that a little later. So when you're in the theater watching Gone in 60 Seconds, this part of the brain now knows that you are literally in a car theft tribe, even though it's completely illusionary. So in order to blend into the car theft tribe, there's one thing you should be doing. Now, when this movie was released in Burnaby, BC, Canada, Professor Jerry Croth from Santa Clara University in California started noticing that the Burnaby police station said the car theft went up 70% in the first 4 days after this movie was released. Some of the local Canadian dispatchers started hearing murmurs that there was car theft in other municipalities. They started making calls, and someone said, "Is that stupid movie rolling in your town?" They said, "Absolutely." So human behavior sort of there's people that understand this. What's on the screen in the day will be on the street at night. So what we're seeing through our screens is an invisible governing force that can be used to uplift society with repetitive positive content, or it can be used to downregulate humanity, morality, and ethics just as easy. And I'll just give you one more example so you can look this up. In the 90s, there was a show called The Cosby Show. Bill Cosby was, the writer of the show. He's also the star of the show. His name was Mr. Huxtable. He was an African-American medical doctor. His wife, Claire, was an African-American lawyer. Now, during the 9-year run of the show, African-American enrollment in law school and med school went up 19% because of the positive. We could argue either way there, but there was a direct effect that there's more lawyers and doctors in the African-American community because of the positive repetitive content. And then the show was canceled, oddly enough. That should say something, sort of its popularity was waning, but it wasn't near the bottom. And then the Black community was flooded with negative content where the African-American enrollment in post-secondary education plummeted to pre-Cosby Show levels. And Dr. Jerry Croth again called this the Cosby effect. And then with the plummeting of the achievements, Dr. Jerry Croth called it the Lil Wayne effect. So just so that people know, this is a real effect. You can see it in the song Macarena. You can see it in Fast and the Furious with the accumulation of Honda Civics with hydraulic shocks and big mufflers. And people just believe that they're making up their behavior on their own, which is perfect for a psychological manipulation expert who knows that's not the case whatsoever.
It's so fascinating, this stuff, isn't it? And understanding how influenced we are. I tell you what I was thinking. When you go into a restaurant and you're looking at the menu and there'll be a little sign saying most popular dish, that again, it's a perception of, oh, well, the tribe mostly eats this. And you don't even think it. You just think, oh, okay, that's a popular one. I'll grab it. But it all comes down to our wiring and how we perceive things. And I've been a big advocate on my show to my listeners about just don't watch the news. I mean, it's such, I say it's a low vibrational kind of energy. But you do notice, people that regularly participate in that content, this is something I've noticed, they will parrot the exact same words. It's crazy. And thing is, I try and just give compassion now to individuals that don't want to look at other options of maybe not watching the news or, even acknowledging that it's heavily influencing them. It's mainly the older generation, I find, that are just very fixated on that sort of content. So it just shows you how influenced we are to our environment, which is basically the screen nowadays.
Yeah, the historical context of this can be traced back to a country called media, They will not hide this on Google. You can look up Media the Country, and it's an old area where Iran or Azerbaijan is today. And the leaders of media 2,000 years ago would court the kings and the queens of the Mediterranean and teach them the fine art of psychologically manipulating people from a stage, which is almost the same sort of thing as manipulating people through the screen. So this fine art of controlling people's behavior unconsciously is very old, and it's still in play today. It's not taught in university or schools, and it's not taught for a reason, because 80% of all psychological manipulation is repetitive content. And also, if you can sort of intoxify or disrupt brain function of the person you're loading the repetitive content into, they will follow it more forcefully. And this is why they have the junk food at the cinema. The cinema would be there to control the repetitive content in order to control your behavior. And then if you had a caffeine is very effective at opening up the subconscious mind pathway for manipulation. So this is why the chocolate and the pop, and even Mountain Dew, that's not a darker soda pop, it is loaded with caffeine. So the people sort of organizing our entire society, almost at every nook and cranny, it's based on controlling the thoughts of the public.
You talked about in your content about the glass ceiling of our minds. I'd love for you to open that one up, because again, it's these invisible barriers that, stop people losing weight, stop people becoming, the best version of themselves. What is this glass ceiling? Hey guys, quick interlude to talk about today's sponsor of the show, and that is Hunter & Gather. I mention this regularly on the show, and that is the damaging, toxic effects of inflammatory seed oils are on our diets. And as we know, seed oils are pretty much in everything in our standard confectionery food. The good news is we can do something about it. Hunter & Gather are an ancestrally inspired real food supplement brand, basically simplifying optimal healthy living by making the most of an amazing range of products with no compromise in taste. And that is the most important thing. If you're going to invest in a new brand and try something different, it's got to taste good, right? It has to taste good. And when it's good for your health, that for me is the double whammy. So all of their products are free from refined sugar, gluten, and of course, the deadly seed oils that I regularly mention on the show. Their mayonnaise is, my goodness, amazing. I highly recommend it, and just try it for yourselves, guys. It kicks ass of any standard supermarket mayonnaise that is out there in the marketplace. So we've teamed up with the guys at Hunter & Gather to offer you guys 10% off, which you can redeem by going to hunterandgatherfoods.com and using the code IDEAL10. And I'll put all of that in the show notes for you guys to check out. And what's pretty cool as well, they also offer an additional 10% for their subscription users, which of course you can cancel at any time, but getting 20% off is even better, right? We've had the co-founders on the show of Hunter Gather, Amy and Jeff. We'll put that in the show notes for you guys. I love what those guys are doing, the vision of the brands. And as I said, their confectionery and supplements are top drawer. I absolutely love the mayonnaise, the ketchups, along with a lot of their supplements. So definitely check those guys out. As I said, head over to hunterandgatherfoods.com and use the code IDEAL10 for 10% off. Enjoy, and let's get back to the show. You talked about in your content about the glass ceiling of our minds. I'd love for you to open that one up, because again, it's these invisible barriers that, stop people losing weight, stop people becoming, the best version of themselves. What is this glass ceiling?
Well, it's sort of what your expectations are. I mean, the most repetitive things in your life, we always build our old house in our new house. So whatever you got used to as a child, you will sort of subconsciously recreate in your adulthood, unless you know how this works. So I remember this one girl. I'll give you an example. So this one lady, and she wanted to have a successful relationship, and then she just got married, and she kept chasing married men outside her marriage. And what we found out through my self-sabotage questionnaire is her dad was never home. So what was really going on there is the repetitive content of her environment was leading her behavior, where as an adult, she managed to get a man inside her home, which was in contradiction to the repetitive content she lived through. So she was chasing married men outside the marriage because she was sort of looking for that lost father figure. And because she would be chasing men outside her marriage, it would guarantee that the man who had set up the marriage with her would leave. And therefore, the subconscious has recreated the fatherless, manless home that she was used to. So that's a glass ceiling that she had to break through in a relationship perspective. But we do have glass ceilings. For example, you could take someone like Aaron Hernandez. I'm not too sure if anybody's ever watched that Netflix documentary. For someone who's researches psychology, it's a very hard thing to watch. Aaron Hernandez was a top-rate draft pick of the New England Patriots, and he was from a very poor neighborhood. So his repetitive content was cemented in his brain, poor. And his dad used to beat him, violent. So all of the subconscious is used to is poor and violent, poor and violent, poor and violent. And he basically, that's the script that man had for navigating his life. And wherever he went, because it was his normal and his familiar, he's going to set up camp, no matter how good the environment. So he gets drafted first, not first overall, but might not even be in the first round. A lot of people steer clear of him, but he got drafted, went to the Super Bowl. I don't think they won that year. That was his first year. He was absolutely fantastic. They signed him a $30 or $50 million contract. This is not the script he's used to. He ran into the glass ceiling long before trouble started. But he wants to go back to where he feels safe, because the repetitive content is where neurologically you'll feel at home. And Aaron Hernandez went out and started murdering people at night and was found out and charged with murder and found guilty of murder and thrown in prison. And the prison calls are recorded. His mom made the call, and Aaron admitted, "You know what, Mom? I just feel safer in here." And it's hard to watch because there were so many other attempts to get back and scurry back. And if sports players would do some self-sabotage psychology research and know that you're from the poor end of town, you're not going to feel comfortable in the rich end of town. And if you don't know how this works, you can sabotage. Michael Vick was the same. He was the highest paid player in the NFL. And 2 years after he signed a contract, I think it was worth $140 million. He had, as soon as he signed the contract, he started a dogfighting ring up and down the East Coast of the United States. And it took 2 years after his big contract to be found out he was thrown in prison and lost it all because he was from another very poor part of town.
For me, I think they weren't able to change their self-image of themselves, right? The program they had of themselves. I look at someone like Conor McGregor, the Irish MMA fighter, who again came from a poor background. It looks like he's been able to readjust himself. He now wears suits. He's very much changed his self-image. There was a couple of sticky points in the middle where there were random things where he's been arrested for like punching old men in the face in a pub. So it sounds like he's gone, whether consciously or subconsciously, he's gone through a transition where he's been able to come out the other side. But it's so fascinating, isn't it? Because we want the safety of what we're used to. And it's fascinating that NFL chap started killing people because his mind was saying, if I do this, I'll be safe in a prison.
Right. You know? And so it's a fake safety. See, that's the thing that the average person doesn't know. And it's what the people ruling us do know, is that we will have a magnetic affinity for the most repetitive impact, even if it kills us. Even if it destroys us, even if it destroys our family, destroys our health, causes premature injury or death. It's like a kamikaze pilot. The kamikaze pilot starts off like in World War II Japan. It was a young child walking across the town square where they used to celebrate the kamikaze. So maybe he's on the hand of his mom when he's 15 or 14. Mom's dragging him by the town square. He's watching the kamikaze celebrations, and being accepted by the herd does register as safety. So if the subconscious says, hey, if you go do that, you're safe. And the conscious, and so what happens is you're safe, but you're dead. And so this part of the brain can be really led astray. I hope everybody knows what kamikaze pilots are, but this part of the brain can be led astray by repetitive content in a way where the average person would never believe consciously they could be led to destroy themselves. But in the realm of Tavistock, psychological manipulation, this is child's play. You can make people do anything. Darren Brown's documentary called The Push, which was, I'm not too sure if anybody's seen that. And even myself, I watched it. I had to use duct tape to put my jaw back into my skull. But Darren convinced 3 people to commit murder. What they thought was murder. The guy getting murdered was thrown off the side of a building, but he was harnessed. But the people throwing the guy off the building did not know that. And all that was used to make 3 out of 4 regular people chuck this old man off the side of a building in a real murder that was not murder because the guy was harnessed, was group pressure and psychological manipulation that only took 4 hours. And the average person has been under this manipulation since the time they flew out the womb.
I saw that documentary years ago. I think it was released 2018 or 19. And I recently rewatched it, obviously following your content. Fascinating stuff. And what I find interesting, it's been removed from Netflix. I couldn't find it anywhere. I had to go somewhere else to find it. So I'll put it in the show notes for the listeners. But it's such a fascinating watch. And I'm thinking, you put yourself in those individual shoes. You're thinking, I wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't. But then it's so subtle, like how he went to a dinner, everyone's dressed up, but they deliberately dressed him down. So he felt insignificant. All of these, they're so subtle, what they did. But it makes you realize, wow, this stuff is powerful. When you add up all the different tricks that they used, you can get someone to do some really bad things.
Absolutely. And even, on the final scene in this Darren Brown's The Push, and it is very hard to find because they don't want people understanding that humans could be manipulated. The slogan of the fake charity that was involved was whatever it takes. So, and there was a TV screen up on the top of the roof, which was repeating the slogan as the group of actors were ramping up the group pressure for, the victim to go push this old man off the side of a building. In the background, this TV was always blaring, whatever it takes, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. So again, you see the repetition. And as a psychological reprogramming expert who knows most of these tricks, I mean, you could just see it, and it was it was so nerve-wracking to know where they were going with this, and you could see the victim. And we're all victims of this if we watch the TV and the movies. Really, you could see where this was going, where these people were getting ground down and really wanted to be part of the herd. And they had picked their victims carefully too. They screened for the 4 victims very well.
I guess there are certain people that are more susceptible to certain forms of manipulation. And I wonder why that is, whether it's genetic or whether it's they've learned from their environment. I don't know. But yeah, there's obviously some people they screened them because they wanted people that were more susceptible, right, to commit murder, essentially.
Yeah, it's like basically it's heavily, they're compliant people that did well in school, usually. People that, tried to get B's or A's in school and really take their value from the herd opinion. And so it's about 30 or 40% of the population that can be manipulated almost instantly even on a stage hypnosis presentation. Not everybody can be put under. There's a percentage sent off, but there's certainly a percentage that stay on. And it's around 30 to 40%. They have no ability to resist group pressure or repetitive content.
I would love for you to again, I listening to your content. There's a story about you went to a hypnosis show with a friend. Tell that story. That was fascinating.
Well, that's when I really got interested in it. We were in Las Vegas. It was one of the second last nights. Of course, we were very tired from the shenanigans. And someone said, "Do you want to go to an X-rated hypnotist show?" And I'm like, reluctantly, I didn't even want to go out. They said, "Let's go. You can just sit there." And the birthday boy was my friend John. And he said, "I'll go up." And I'm like, okay, like how bad can this be? Wow. Oh my God. So he went up, and it's like I described earlier. I think 30 people went up and about 12 got sent off. So we're dealing with 18 people. And yeah, they were put into what's called trance, which is induction, which means their brainwave function slows down, which also means they're defenseless to attack. This is the basis of hypnosis, is to sit your victim down, which means they're more vulnerable to an attack. You slow their brainwave function down, which means you're not going to react quickly. You're more vulnerable to attack. You get them to close their eyes, and even you set up behind them as the person organizing the show. The body is very smart and knows, okay, I'm relaxed. I'm open to attack. I'm sitting down. Someone's standing behind me. I'm very vulnerable again. I have my eyes closed. I can't see the attack. So in the mind, there's a switcheroo of defense mechanism. It goes from strength to obedience. See, it's two pathways, and you can open them like valves on a lock. And basically, when the person is, sat down, relaxed, eyes are closed, they become hyper obedient. And then there's what's called dormant programming. So when they're sort of really relaxed, you tell the subconscious mind a dormant programming. So they gave my friend, they said, when you hear the word Calgary, you will phone your wife and say, "I suck, whatever, for wood and nickels." And I just told myself, well, this is going to go bad for the hypnotist, because there's no way John's going to phone his wife back in Calgary and tell her that phrase. And then say they gave a dormant program to the guy next to my friend and said, when you hear Johnny Cash's Burning Ring of Fire, you're going to put your bum on the stage floor and scoot like a dog with an itchy bum. And then he told the other 16 people all their cues, and then he woke them up out of their trance, out of their slower brainwave state. And then it was like, "Maestro, please." Here came the cues. So Johnny Cash's Burning Ring of Fire came on the speaker system. And there's this one guy, and he's scooting back and forth on the stage like his bum is on fire. I'm really laughing hard at this point. And then the hypnotist says, "Okay, everybody, who would like to make a call to Calgary?" And then I'm looking at John. He picks his phone up instantly, puts it to his ear. They put a boom mic right over my friend's shoulder, and he says that phrase to his wife, and I'm losing my mind. And the other 16 people were doing trumpets and jumping jacks and humping furniture and humping the stage. It was crazy. And then when the music stopped and all the cues were gone, even the guy that was on the floor scooting like his bum was on fire, the hypnotist said, "What are you doing down there?" And he's like, "I don't know." This is how scary it was. And John had his pants off. He was having sex. He had his underwear on, but he was having sex with furniture. It was an X-rated show. And then when John came off, I said, "Did you remember anything that you were doing up there?" And he said, "I remembered everything. I just couldn't stop myself." And that's when I started really getting into this subject.
So you talked about, obviously, repetitive content can influence the mind and we're not even aware of it. And that can be through the screens that we watch. It's now on our wrists. It's in our hand. It's, watching Netflix at night. But you also started talking about, well, also what are we consuming? Like in terms of what are we using to nourish ourselves? And this is really interesting where you talk a lot about coffee. Now, we know alcohol is bad, right? We know that, but we still do it. It's seen as a celebration. But coffee is seen as this independence, cosmopolitan, freedom of expression, I'm living my life, living my best self, walking down a busy high street, sipping my coffee. That's what comes up for me when I think about it. And I know it's so. I would love to get your take on coffee. If you're one to read books and you're hungry for growth in all areas, and you haven't checked out the Ideal Day reading list, I would definitely suggest that you start there. We've received some amazing feedback, and we couldn't be happy with the amount of people that have benefited from the reading list so far. So thank you guys so much for all of that feedback and all of the downloads. So you can download it for free. Just go to youridealday.com/books to get your free copy. The reading list really is years and hundreds of hours of reading through books upon books that you guys basically get the shortlist on what books you need to read to become your ideal self. So as I said, you can check it out at youridealday.com/books. It's completely free, and I know you'll enjoy it. Now, we know alcohol is bad, right? We know that, but we still do it. It's seen as a celebration. But coffee is seen as this independence, cosmopolitan, freedom of expression. I'm living my life, living my best self, walking down a busy high street, sipping my coffee. That's what comes up for me when I think about it. And I know it's so. I would love to get your take on coffee.
Well, I think for the people who love coffee out there, it's best to start slow, baby steps. So if they go to the internet and they look up a video, which is still there, so you put in ABC, which is American News Channel, ABC, and you put in MRI, which stands for magnetic resonance imaging. So put ABC MRI caffeine, and you'll get either a 4-minute clip or even a 30-second clip of this reporter for ABC long ago, and she wants to know how drinking coffee affects her brain function. So they go in with this doctor who's an MRI specialist. She has no coffee. She goes in this big MRI machine, and she's getting proper blood flow to the brain. You can see she's healthy, got a healthy brain function. And then she only has 1 8-ounce cup of coffee. She waits 5 minutes only, throw her back down to lie back in the MRI. They scan her again. And even the doctor's like, okay, this is pretty weird. Your blood flow and oxygen flow to your brain is down 40%. It's not only 40% evenly, there's a big drop, especially from what's called the prefrontal cortex. So that's your thinking part. That's the CEO of your life. It's supposed to check every decision for logical and rational analysis before it flies out of your neurological system. It's the long-term thinking part. And so you really inhibit that part. And without that part, you're going to be having a real hard time. Now, the people who rule us want us not in the prefrontal cortex because it's the rational and logical thinking part of the brain. So you become sort of reactive. When you're drinking caffeine, the reason the blood flow is inhibited from the brain is because caffeine's a poison. I'm not too sure if people are aware of that. So caffeine actually is what's called an alkaloid poison. That's produced by not only the coffee plants, dozens of other plants and trees produce caffeine. Tea leaves, for example, some have caffeine in them. And the caffeine is there to kill bugs that try to eat the plant, or there'd be a component of caffeine in the seeds of the plant. And then the seeds of the plant, like the coffee pod, will be dropped around the periphery of the coffee plant to kill competing foliage. So you get this fight or flight, what's called a fight or flight response. And in the fight or flight response, you retreat from the prefrontal cortex. You activate the limbic system, which is the most primal part of your IQ. It's low IQ, and it's reactive. It has no ability to think things out, no ability to judge long-term consequences, and it runs on programs. Now, if you want sort of a whole book on how dangerous caffeine is for your health and even your mental health, your brain function, go read Caffeine Blues by Stephen Chernisky. Every study that's ever been published in the media, so the media is this group of people that control the repetitive content, that controls your behavior, okay? Every positive study on caffeine has come from what's called the coffee lobby. So it's all funded to make caffeine look fantastic. But if you read Caffeine Blues by Stephen Chernisky, you're going to find out caffeine is very far from fantastic. It alters brain function. And again, your body proper is smart enough to know that when your prefrontal cortex is down or inhibited, you're defenseless. You're not really at your optimal strength. And when you're far away from optimal strength, as you've poisoned yourself without knowing it, and probably poisoned yourself because of the repetitive content in the movie, you go to that secondary pathway of obedience. This is why, say, from 2020 onward, I mean, the gyms were closed for a short while. Bottle shops were open, coffee shops were open, because these ramping up issues were about compliance. So if you're going to maximize compliance, you want the prefrontal cortex shut down. You want the limbic system ramped up. And this is what the average person doesn't know, is in movies and TV shows, the most repetitive picture or object ever analyzed in any movie is a coffee cup, porcelain coffee cup. Take out coffee, it's a porcelain mug, take out coffee cup, an actual coffee shop like in the TV series Friends, the central perk, or you would have the coffee machine on the back counter. And you can see it everywhere. And I tell people, look, watch any movie you want tonight, and in the first 15 minutes, tell me how many coffee cups, coffee mugs, coffee machines on the back counter, coffee shops you see. And if you don't see it, feel free to email me at jason@freedomfromselfsabotage.com, and I guarantee you just missed it, and I'll show you missed it.
It's right. I mean, I remember when Friends, it's over 20 years ago now, but when it was big, iconic thing it still is really, there's loads of reruns. A big part of it was centered around getting my coffee, you go into that central perk. It's a big part of that whole show. And I think also I heard you mention about Fight Club.
Yeah, it was Fight Club. With every scene, the director bragged that every scene of Fight Club had a Starbucks coffee cup in it.
Great film. I'll go back and check that one out. But you can see how that repetitive, and you're not even aware of it on a conscious level, because I know a lot about the subconscious mind. I've studied a lot over the last 2 years, and I know that pretty much the subconscious mind is downloading everything, right? Whereas our conscious mind is this, right now my conscious mind is focused on you, Jason, right? But the subconscious mind is looking at, like, what's going on outside and what's the temperature of the room and all of this sort of stuff. So it's obviously scanning everything all the time, and I'd presume documenting to then work out what's safe for the individual.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this safety, this loving part of the brain is also running your heart rate, scanning your heart rate, scanning your blood. It scans everything, and everything it does, from growing your hair to healing a cut, it's all protective. So this other, mode of protection it has by judging repetitive content and trying to force you over there to fit in with the bigger herd, that's as protective as your heart rate, or, a bowel movement, or a cut healing, or your hair growing. These things are all very important. So it's all unconscious, but people know their heart rate. They don't have control of it. The average female doesn't know that they don't have control of their menstrual cycle. It might be a day early, a day late, but that's as good, but they have no control of it. No one has been told that their behavior is more in that category than being inside their full control. And this is what shocks people to find out through our demonstrations and our presentations inside the Reprogramming Institute, that yes, the average person is in very little control of their own behavior. I mean, that's why everybody's the same. That's why everybody has a cup of coffee in the morning. That's why they think red wine is healthy, where there's absolutely zero science that red wine is healthy for you, and a truckload of science that proves it's unhealthy for you. And you'll see that the person can drink it. They can literally see with their own two eyes that it's not healthy for them. They look like they've been dragged through a hedge ass backwards, as they say over here in Canada. And they still can't process it, because as an individual, what we're seeing doesn't matter in regards to our behavior. What matters is fitting in. So the subconscious mind would say, look, I know you look like a bag of dirt from drinking the wine. You look a little older than your driver's license says, and you're getting a little, muffin top around your belly button, but you got to fit in. It's safer to fit in than it is to go the other way. Because if you stop drinking wine and show up, say, healthy, wealthy, and wise, that's a very small herd. So your subconscious will steer away from all small herds. And the smallest herd is the wealthy herd.
It's fascinating stuff. And I'm curious to understand, is there any other techniques that can be used to influence individuals? We talked about repetition is probably one of the main ones. Are there other techniques and tools that can be used to influence how someone thinks, how someone acts?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's quite a few. Let's say if you go to you can find this book free online. The name of the psychology expert is a little different. His name's Dr. Joost Meerloo, Joost, and it's Meerloo. And he will say that humans are like pretty much any other animal. They're best trained in isolation, so that no one can give them any other ideas to compete with the repetitive barrage that you're going to give them to psychologically manipulate them. So in the business of psychological manipulation, isolation is very effective. I mean, if you're going to train a horse, you'll never see a horse trainer training the horse with all his buddies around, because they'll screw around and laugh and giggle and horse laugh at each other and kind of screw up the training. Same thing with a dog. If you ask, I can't remember the dog whisperer, but you have to train dogs away from the other dogs. They just screw around and bite each other, sniff each other's bum all day. So this is why humans were sent home early in 2020, and the only other entity in their house with them was the TV, which was purposely upregulated for certain particular content to drive the behavior in one direction or the other. Also, sitting down, one of the most repetitive points in our life was when we were a child. And when we were a child, we had a lot of repetitive of looking up at our parents, which were taller than us. So the actual act of kind of cocking our chin up to look at something can trigger the dormant programming of, hey, you're pretty short. It's probably best you obey, because if you're looking up, there's probably a good chance you're looking at a taller, stronger human like we used to when we were children. So a lot of times, this is why political parties will have events where the leader is on a platform or a pedestal or a podium and everybody else is sitting. So in tribal circles, everybody would sit in a circle. And even the leader would sit and sort of talk from a sitting position, and everybody else would be seated. And then no one's really dominating each other physically to trigger obedience in that sort of child dormant program. So, you can imagine someone who's afraid, which lowers IQ and takes blood away from the prefrontal cortex. They go home, they sit down, they're getting terrorized by their TV with repetitive content, and you can see the behavior getting modified. The colors red and blue are the best for psychological manipulation. This is why your political leaders will wear, their most popular is blue suits and blue ties, or blue suits and red ties, because it's been shown to change brain function to be more compliant. The average person has no idea of all these subtle things. Even when your government would have their political announcements from 2020 forward, and they would have a yellow sign, and it would say like, save the NHS or stay home, be safe, I think. it was a yellow sign with sort of a red marking around the edge. And during that time, when it was initially started, this fear campaign, there was also a co-campaign that ran parallel to it about the Asian killer hornets. And the Asian killer hornets are red and yellow. So red and yellow also test for invoking fear, because in the wild, most red and yellow animals are venomous. And these are very repetitive old genetic programs we run, and they've tested all the colors. They know how to scare the bejesus out of you at a subconscious level, and they throw it all at you in one major fastball right down the middle.
Wow. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Because it's kind of instinctive, right? It's playing on people's instinctive reactions or behaviors to certain colors, or, you said looking up. That's built because we were young and we knew that we weren't strong and we needed safety from bigger humans.
Do what they say and you're real safe.
Yeah. What about confusion as well? Because I think when people are confused, they tend to just conform to authority. I think in general, we're told authority is our mum and dad. And it's great when people break free of that and they're not at all. But I think confusion can drive people to be like, I just want to be safe. I'll just do what they say.
Yeah, again, you can see the basis there is the brain function. So if you're confused, the body proper, like every cell says, Adam's confused. This isn't good. And when you're confused, you're not very good at making logical or rational decisions. So you have sort of two options for defense, rational and logical decisions. And if you're not able to manufacture those, because you're screwed up on chemicals or you're confused, the body says, hey, Adam, no problem. We got this other defense pathway we can initiate, and it is the compliance pathway. So the confusion is always purposeful. I just ordered a manual that was from the CIA, where they give you the most confusing 2 or 3 sentences that you can throw at someone during interrogations and regular interactions, where you completely dominate them. So, and even Juice Merleau, where you can get his book called Menticide, The Death of the Mind and Psychological Manipulation, you can get that free online. And he also shows the research with prisoners of war that confusion makes people really compliant, simply because the rational and logical part of the brain can't make head nor tails of the situation. It's just kind of spinning. That wheel that spins when the computer's thinking, and the body's like, hurry up, make a decision. And the logical part of the brain is saying, I'm not getting enough info here to save us. And so the body proper says, yeah, no problem. We'll go to the compliant part, which I call Joe. And Joe comes out and says, hey, I'll defend you. I'll just do whatever I'm told. This is the way I defend myself. And this is why someone like, say, Fauci, he first came out, and if you don't think it's scripted, you're very far behind the 8 ball here. So Fauci comes out very early in 2020 and says, oh, masks, the Asians wear them. We don't have to. They don't stop anything. They're more about psychologically appeasing yourself, that there's some safety. And then 6 weeks later, yep, you got to wear a mask. And someone's like, oh, I'm confused. I'm like, good. Please understand that what he said about no masks and then going to the one mask, this is all scripted, because it's all based on confusion, psychological manipulation. Then he went to 2 masks. So, of course, I'm watching him put a mask on and then 2 masks. And I know exactly what's going on. I'm like, I bet the average person is confused a lot, because this is it. And then he said, if you took if you complied and took your medicine, you could not wear a mask outside. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense, but it's never supposed to. What about the mask inside? And aren't you immune? And this is what's going through the person's head. Like, I thought I was immune. Why do I have to wear it inside even? And I'm like, well, you're not understanding. This is all about confusing you. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter if you took the medicine. You had to wear the mask anyway. And then all of a sudden, the mask didn't matter ever. And then the person's like, wow, this is really weird. Why? And what about the person that didn't take their medicine? You mean we're the same? And everybody's confused. And then you go to the restaurant, you got to walk in with the mask, and then you can sit down and take it off to eat. But if you go to the bathroom, and so that presumes like, the pathogen is a thinking pathogen. It will only attack. It's got a measuring tape and it knows who's sitting and who's standing. And it confuses people, but it's meant to, because confused people do what they're told more than anybody else. And so there were so many confusing things. I mean, the people with the plexiglass masks, and where it's supposed to be like the pathogen floats in the air. And I remember going to the grocery store, and I know what this was based on. So I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not going to fall for this liaria. And, they're walking down. They said to me, you can't bring your bags, to save the environment. I would have the bags. I don't like plastic either. I know it's toxic. The less of it out there, the better. So I bring my bags from home for my groceries, and they say, well, you can't bring the bags from home because it might have the germ on them. And I said, well, my clothes came from home. Like, do you want me to show up naked or what's going on? But I knew it was all there for what I call Joe and Jane Coffee Shop and Mike and Michelle Mask Wearer and Kevin and Karen TV Watcher, who are the targets of this sort of psychological manipulation. So the confused mind is very easy to control.
Yeah, and these people, they want to do good and they want to fit in and they want to do what they think is right. And it's interesting, you talk about Fauci confusing people. Some people will be like, I'll do what he says. Some people will be like, that's absolute nonsense. And then you'll go out into society. I remember we went to Barcelona, and I remember at the time in Europe, obviously the UK it's not part of the European Union, but it's part of Europe as a landmass, right? But the UK is very aligned with the US in terms of culture, whereas Europe is just its own entity. It's a beautiful place, so much culture. And at that moment in time, everyone was masked up in Europe, not so much in the UK. So we arrive, and I'm like, I'm not doing the mask thing. My logical mind was it's nonsense. And we get on the underground, on the tube, and everyone's masked up. And, I don't speak Spanish. My wife does, but I'm just like, well, I ain't doing it. And because of the conformity, there were people were getting quite aggressive in tone, arguing with me to in Spanish, put your mask on. And I'm thinking, wow, it's their fear is now doing the job of the people that want you to, comply for them. So we ended up, I refused to put it on. So we had to just get off the train and get onto another carriage. But it's just fascinating, isn't it? That people will be in that confused state and they will literally let you know about it and get you to conform if you try to step out of line in their world.
Well, they want to get sort of a hero badge from their tribe. So it's one thing to be part of the bigger tribe, Adam, but it's another thing to sort of back up the tribe and show your loyalty and beat your chest in front of the tribe that you're counting on for protection. So what's happening there is that, you have a tribe. It's like you're challenging their tribe. And then the dominant males, wherever you are, will take it as a challenge to them that you're threatening the group. And so they want to be seen as the heroes. And they also want to get points and ranking inside the tribal hierarchy for backing up or beating their chest and, showing their loyalty to the tribe they've made a membership in. And this is also why physical strength is very important in situations like this. If we go back to the push, only 3 out of the 4 people murdered the guy, pushed him, the poor old man, off the side of the building. Again, he was harnessed. But the guy who declined was taller than anybody else in the pressure group. So the thing is, if you're a Ron Gronkowski of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the tube, no one's coming up to you, because physical strength is very important for making tribal stance. You're not going to come up to someone who's 6'5" and start looking up, because as soon as they look up, they've also triggered their dormant child programming, that they're in trouble already, and they got to watch their ass. And if there's no one else in the train that's as tall as this guy who's not masking, you can dominate the entire rest of the tribe by your physical strength. And so this is why I always tell males in this awakening movement, at least hold yourself with confidence. Make sure you're stronger. Make sure it can show through your clothes that you are a physically dominant male, in order not to get bullied by, this energy that can rip through and, the alternate tribe.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? And people want to do good and obviously impress within their tribe. So that's why you'd have, I just remember like people changing their profile pictures to, I did the thing, and it's crazy. It's just like, why would you do that? But it's I think it's at a psychological level, it's that acceptance. In the UK, they used a lot of similar memes to wartime efforts. It's like, we're in this together. It's like it was a war. And I was just like, this is nuts,
Because everybody wants to be a hero and be somebody. But in our society, just like any other society before us, it takes a lot of effort to be somebody in our society. So if you basically make being different so hard, you get this huge mass of people who want to be heroes neurologically, but are also afraid to be different. So you have this undercurrent. And then you tell the person, so you have this growing pressure. And Dr. Matthias Desmet goes over this with what's called mass formation. So you have this disenfranchised population that's never achieved any greatness. And then you tell them, you know what, here's your chance. And this isn't going to impress me because I'm a hero every day. I've worked for myself. I've supported myself financially since the day I graduated from university. But if you have this disenfranchised masses who've never achieved greatness, never done anything great in their life, never had a win, never had a success, never really had a victory, and you tell them, hey, psst, come over here, I'll tell you something. You can be a hero. All you got to do is go take the medicine, wear the mask. They're like, really? That's it? And the psychology expert says, that's it, baby. That's all you got to do. And so this is a very common psychological manipulation tactic. You offer hero labels and hero medals, but for things anybody can do. And then you say, this is your chance, go do it. This is the window of opportunity for you to level up and accomplish your destiny. And so that psychological undercurrent is satisfied, and it brings them into the iron grip of the tyrant.
It is fascinating stuff, this whole topic, and I think we're only really scratching the surface. I want to just focus on some good things, right? Because we know this can be used for good and it can be used for evil. So, you spoke about working with individuals that wanted to lose weight and they did everything and then they hit that glass ceiling. So obviously there's ways of breaking through it, and there's ways of rewiring our subconscious. There's ways of wanting to be in another tribe, as it were. So what would be some of the techniques that people can use to start to change that within themselves?
Well, it's a war of repetition. This is a real war. A war of repetition. The most repetitive content wins. So you have to upregulate the positive content. And I would say start in the area where your goal is the most dominant. Like it might be health for some people. So everything's got to be healthy. Hang around healthy people, watch cooking shows, listen to someone who was overweight and lost the weight, healthy podcasts, how to live healthy, read Paul Chek's book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. That's the best book in the world on healthy living. And so you just upregulate the healthy content. And then the subconscious mind does what it's actually designed to do, which is saying, oh, this is funny. It looks like we're in a different tribe. The most repetitive content recently has been healthy content. And then it starts changing your neurology to pursue healthy content, whether you like it or not. And so maybe it's relationships. You'd have to level up the repetition in in relationship areas. And you want to really downregulate the negative content. Like if you're having trouble in your relationship, you don't want to watch 90 Day Fiancé. I've watched that here in Latvia a couple of times. It is a trash fire, train wreck for anybody that wants a healthy relationship, even with themselves. And this is why it's on TV, is to wreck the foundations of marriage. So you can't watch Bad Moms, Dirty Grandpa, The Equalizer, King of Queens, Seinfeld, where everybody's a child, no one's got a job, everybody's screwing around, and expect to be an empowered, fully functional adult. Just upregulate the positive content, downregulate the negative, and you'll actually do to yourself what our architects of doom have been doing to you since the day you were born.
I agree. Your environment's super important. And me and my wife will sometimes watch Netflix because we like some shows, but we now view it through a lens of we have to be very careful. Every scene or any particular turn of phrase, it's in there for a reason. So we will now openly, as we're watching something and a certain scene comes in or a certain turn of phrase, or I'll pause it and we'll be like, okay, that's trying to get us to think like this. But then I also think to myself, do you know what? There must be so much in the background that I'm not picking up consciously that my subconscious is picking up. And I tell you what's really interesting. So we mentioned Conor McGregor earlier. I've loved watching him rise to where he is now because he's been about the law of attraction and using his mind to manifest. And I'm like, I love that he's done it where he's come from. And there's a recent documentary on Netflix about him. It's called like Masterful McGregor, something like that. It's basically fly on the wall, following him around for 5 years. And I'm watching it and I'm thinking, what, is there any messages in this? I'm thinking, no, it's just him. He's an Irish guy, he's rough and ready. And I'm thinking, there's nothing too much that I've consciously picked up. And then I go to bed and all I can think about is Conor McGregor. I'm lying there just thinking about it because I think it was such a stimulating show. And the next day I'm thinking about Conor. And I'm like, wow, I mean, they've just implanted it right into my brain. I've only watched one episode, and I'm thinking that's the subconscious stuff going on that I'm not even aware of,
Yeah, you've watched the repetition visually. And like I said, this part of the brain doesn't know the difference between what's on the screen, real life, and imagined thought. Your thoughts of him, once your eyes are closed, also count on the repetitive list. So what you're thinking about gets, because it doesn't know you're dreaming. It thinks your whole life, whether it's imagined or seen through the eyes or seen on the screen, is one big show. So whatever's the most repetitive in your dreams, whatever's the most repetitive on your TV shows and in your real life, that will be your life. And the scary thing is if it's not the life you want, when a better life comes around, you're so uncomfortable, you don't have a script for it, you usually reject it. And that's classic self-sabotage.
Jason, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I would recommend everyone check out your podcast and your Instagram. I think it's all great. Where can our listeners best connect with you?
Well, I think it's best just to email me at jason@freedomfromselfsabotage.com. And I'll just put you on my private email list. You can go to my website sometimes, jchristoff.com. Christoff's Christ with an OFF on the end. And that's not, I'm not trying to subliminally manipulate there with the Christ reference. But you want on my email list because the things I said, like if you want good content that will be censored, there's things they don't want you to know about your environment, the TV, the movies, your actors. They don't want you to know a lot of things. I can only push that out through the email system.
Amazing. Put that in the show notes for the listeners. Final question from me. What 3 pieces of advice would you give our listeners to help them achieve their ideal day?
I would say invest in a $35 book by Paul Chek, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. I'm just trying to get your brain function more in the prefrontal cortex so they can't be manipulated as easily. I tell people, I'm going to name 3 things you want to work on. Make some baby steps. Start where you are. Use what you can. Do it slowly. But the top 3 that are going to make you compliant when you really shouldn't: alcohol, coffee, and TV. if you can address those slowly over time, know that your TV and movie screens are not there to entertain you. They're there to entrain you. They are documented weapons of war called fifth generation warfare modalities. They are only there to manipulate your behavior into the garbage. So, and of course, alcohol consumption and coffee consumption just rewire your neurology so you're more easy to manipulate. Work on those big three, and I guarantee you, if you upregulate the positive content and downregulate the negative yourself, I guarantee your life will get better. Absolutely 100%.
Jason Christoff, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks again.
You're welcome.
And for more after the show, make sure you head over to youridealday.com where you can find out more information. Please support the show by heading to Apple Podcasts to leave a review and to let everybody know that the show is awesome. Or you can take a screen grab, post it on your Instagram stories, or just tell a friend about the podcast to get the word out there. I'd appreciate that so much. Take care, and thanks for tuning in.